Welcome back to Shutterbug Academy, and we are finally taking a look at Adobe Photoshop. Now, if you haven't watched the previous videos, they are very helpful. Remember, this is a linear series. We covered how to set Photoshop up. Remember, when you're looking at my version of Photoshop, I have a custom toolbar, custom windows, set up color management, everything is ready to go. And then I've taken my images and I run everything through Adobe Camera Raw first, and then I get to Adobe Photoshop. Now today, what we're going to be taking a look at are these selection tools. So at this point in toning, really what you're trying to do is refine an image. And the way you're most likely going to be doing that is by doing little sections of the image. And so we're going to need to make selections. And there's really two main ways to do that. One is using the selection tools built into Photoshop. And the other is either using a brush or the new adjustment brush, make those adjustments. Today, we're going to focus on how to use the selection tools. So let's come on over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this toolbar out because I think it's going to make it more helpful, just so it's easier for everybody to see. Right here is our toolbar. And just as a reminder, all tools, I have it hovering so they tell me what's going on. And if you look next to that move right here, there's the little letter V. That is the quick key. However, that's the quick key for the active tool. Remember, there are other tools here. So the quick key for the artboard now is the letter V. So it's whatever tool is active is going to be the quick key. So this is our move tool, and this allows us to move objects around. So I'll simply just take the lasso, I'll grab this, we'll take the move tool, and boom, I can move this item around. This isn't a traditional use for this. This gives you the idea of what it does. It's the move tool. It's for moving all kinds of things around. You can move selections, objects, whatever need be. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to zoom back out, and I'm just going to not make any adjustments, but we'll make some different adjustments there. So right up here on the top, notice we have something called layer, and next to it, it says auto select. If you were to turn this on, it automatically selects the layer it thinks it should select or the selection. It can be quite annoying because you're trying to move one aspect and then it auto selects something else. I prefer to turn this off, and we'll get more into auto select and when it's beneficial later on. But we're just going to go ahead right here and turn these back off so you can see what's going on. So that is the move tool. Next up, we have the Marquee tool. So if we come here, we can see the quick key is the letter M. And if I click and hold, we have other ones. So we have the rectangular, we have elliptical, single row, and single column. I've never actually used single row and single column. Probably used more in graphic design or something else, not as much in photography. And truthfully, I don't use the rectangular Marquee tool and elliptical Marquee tool unless I'm designing something graphic oriented. But this is the way they work. We will just do the rectangular Marquee tool because the circular one works exactly the same. So let's select that. So the way this works is you're going to left click and drag, all right? It's going to freeform make a selection. Now we can make any sort of selection that we want. So I want to select that area, boom. Now this area in here is selected. Hit Command Z to undo that. So if you're using the rectangular Marquee tool and you want to make a perfect square, what you're going to do is you're going to hold the Shift key. So I'm going to press Shift with my left hand, left click and drag. It's going to drag a perfect square. Now I want to let go with my right hand that's unclicking it and then the Shift key. If you do the Shift key before, it will maybe shift it and not make it perfectly square. If you're in the elliptical Marquee tool and you want to make a perfect circle, you do the same thing. You hold that key down, okay? Now, with all selection tools, and we're going to take a look at this when I get into the lasso, if you hold shift, you can also add to the selection. If you hold the option on a Mac, alt on a PC, you can deselect from a selection. And the way a selection works is you can use it to cut something out to make an adjustment. So I'll come in here and just brighten this up so you can see that area is getting brighter. It's just happening in that specific area. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off so that we don't see it. Our next tool is right here, and this is a brand new tool inside of Adobe Photoshop, and it's called the Selection Brush tool. And look, what it does is nothing new. It's something that we've been able to do just using a different process. So they've created this to make it easier. It's really made for people that use tablets or laptops where they're using their fingers to make selections to make it a little bit easier. But truthfully, we could do this exact same thing with either using the lasso or just manually making an adjustment. But we'll take a look and I'll show you what the selection brush does. So go ahead and click on the brush, and the size of the brush is on the outside of my cursor at this point. So if I use the bracket keys, you can see I can make the right bracket makes it bigger. The left bracket makes it smaller. You can also come up here, click on this, and this will allow you to adjust your brush size and your brush hardness. So I'm going to put the brush hardness in the middle. And let me show you what this does because I think it's going to be helpful. However, to show what hardness does, I think it's more beneficial for me to come over here, click on the image, and we're just going to use the traditional brush because it's easy for me to apply it for everybody to see. So we're going to come on up here, and this is the tool. So this is our size of our tool. We're going to make it smaller, and I'm going to make the hardness all the way down to the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is just make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm simply going to take my brush and make a little adjustment. And you can see this brush has a strong feather. Now a feather creates a soft outer edge, and what that outer edge being soft does, it allows us to blend it into other areas. If we come up here and we make the hardness all the way up, it's going to give us a hard edge. So when we make that same brush adjustment, see how it's a straight hard edge? Well, when you're trying to blend things in and you have a hard edge, it's usually not going to be that helpful. However, if you're trying to make a really precise adjustment, having that harder edge can be beneficial. So we have a feathered edge and a non-feathered edge, and you will see that a lot of stuff in here having, whether it's feather or non-feather, is very helpful or beneficial. So we'll take this and go back out of this, and then we're going to click back on that selective brush. So when we come up here to the size, we can adjust that. We can add that hardness to the brush. So I'm just going to leave it in the middle because I think that's the most beneficial spot. So if I wanted to select this bird, I would simply just left click and then apply. And notice we're getting this kind of little pinkish area. That area is showing that we've selected that area. So if I wanted to come in here and I'm going to make a way too bright adjustment, you can see it brightened that area. For an image like this, where we need to have a much more exact selection, this isn't beneficial. But if you were just doing someone's face, using the selection brush is really easy and a smart way to work inside of Adobe Photoshop. So this is the selection brush. And up here in the selection brush, you will notice that we've got an add and then a subtract to that selection brush. And let's go ahead and apply the selection. And let's say I went way out there and it made way too much. I can come up here and hit subtract, and then I can just paint over that area. My mouse is acting up a little bit, but we can come in here and take that out. Let's say we had another bird over here. We could then come and say add, and then we could apply it to another area in another location. So you have add and subtract to your selection brush. The selection brush just selects an area. So we're going to come down here. We'll hit Command Z to get out of those selections. Or you can just hit Command D, which is deselect. So Command D, deselect for a Mac, Control D on a PC is deselect. Let's come to our next brush. And our next brush that we see here is the lasso brush. And this is basically just a free form brush. So I'm going to left click and hold, and basically any shape that I draw, it's going to make a selection. If I want to make something like this, it's going to make a selection. Now, if I don't hold the shift key to add, every time I make a new selection, it's going to delete the old selection and create a new selection. But as we learned, if we hold the shift key, that's always add. And if you look at that lasso, look, it's the lasso, but when I hold the shift key, we get that little plus next to the icon. That means that we're going to add. We can also come up here. We've got just your regular selection. This is add to your selection. This is subtract to the selection. And this is intersect with a selection. So I could also come up here. So if I wanted to deselect one of these adjustments that I have, the way you do it is you actually circle the outside of the whole thing, which is a little weird. And you're saying, hey, if you just go through the center, it's only going to remove that portion that you had. Now, I don't use these little items up here. I use the quick keys just because my hand is used to hitting them. And I would say you're better off learning to use toggle keys on keyboards because it's just a more efficient way. Photoshop and just about any Adobe program is loaded with them. So that's the lasso tool. Now, the lasso tool also has a feather, and it has a little feather up here to manually apply it. So if I come in here and I have 0 feather and I make an adjustment, we'll make that selection. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add a feather, a 55. I'm going to do the same thing. And just like we saw with that selection brush, I'm going to make a curves adjustment. You're going to see how this is soft and blends in, but this leaves that harsh edge. This wouldn't look good normally. So if you're using the lasso, you usually need to add a feather to it. Now there's a way to do it in something called select and mask that we're going to take a look at in an upcoming video. But you need to add a feather when using the lasso tool. Now, some of these new AI tools don't have feathers built in, but they make a really exact selection, and that's going to make a big difference. So remember, feather with the lasso tool. Next one here is the object selection tool, and the quick key for that is W. And this is probably my favorite selection tool since Adobe's come out. They've had good ones and bad ones, and I love this. So the way this works is you simply just click on it. And then you see right up here, this means the computer is thinking. It's analyzing our image, okay? And now when I hover over something, notice it makes a selection. So let's go to and you'll notice we've got a bunch of objects. And if we have the object selection tool selected, watch what happens when I hover over something. It's analyzing and noticing that each little piece in here is a selective object. So let's say I wanted to darken all these lines down here. I can click on it and it's going to make a selection. I can hold Shift, or I can come up here and click the add to a selection, but I'm going to hold Shift. I'm going to add that line. It's going to make that a selection. Hold Shift, make that as a selection. And now that all the lines are selected, I can come up here, I can make a curves adjustment layer, and I can simply darken those areas. So I can make an adjustment in just those selective areas. Occasionally, you will have an issue where the object selection tool doesn't get things right. So let's come over here and you'll notice that it didn't select this bottom corner because it has this kind of sheer fabric. If we wanted to select that area, we might need to tell it, but occasionally, especially when people are right next to each other, it doesn't always make a perfect selection. Or let's say we just wanted the cap of this object, not the whole bottle. Well, we have options. We can come up here into mode and you'll notice you've got rectangle and lasso. So we'll use the rectangle to just draw an area and we're saying, hey, Adobe, this is the area I want you to make a selection with. not the whole bottle, just a portion of the bottle. So it's going to look and think and do its magic. And just like that, it made a selection. Now it added this little bit. Now we can remove that by holding the Alt or Option to subtract from a selection. Or we can also use the lasso to do the exact same thing. So in this case, if I just wanted the plant, not the whole planter, I can select this area. Photoshop's going to analyze what I did, and you can see it's just selecting that area, which is the part of the cactus, not the whole plant. So we have those options. All right, so we're back to our original image. You'll also notice we have something here called Select Subject. And this is awesome. It's down here in that contextual taskbar as well. But we can simply just hit Select Subject, even though we're in the Object Finder, and boom, just like that, it's going to select that subject and do it very accurately. That is the Object Selection tool. Now, the next tool that we have here is usually nestled under these, and it is called the Magic Wand. And I know everybody's dying to use their own Magic Wand inside of Photoshop, but really, the Magic Wand is not the greatest item for photography. It really excels when you come into graphic design, and so I will show you. So let's go ahead and make a selection, and I'm going to fill this selection with black. I'm going to take that magic wand and I'm going to select the black. And so first of all, when you sample, you have the option to change how the sample size. I prefer 11 by 11 average, and that looks at all 11 pixels around the point where I click, and it averages them. And that's the selection area that I want. Tolerance is how accurate do you want it to be to that color. So the lower the tolerance, the less of an area it's going to select, the higher, the more. And I'll show you how it works. It's really not going to matter because everything in here is perfectly black. And this is where the magic wand excels. I click and boom, it's a perfect selection. Well, why? Because it's solid black. Let's now try to select this cloud. And yeah, didn't do such a good job. Now, you'll notice that it selected all these areas. That is because contiguous is not checked, okay? If we do contiguous and then we click, it's just going to do this area. If we uncheck it, anything that is this value that we're making a selection on, it's going to try to select it. And you can see it's got this really weird area. Now I can increase the area by increasing the tolerance, but it's still not making any sort of intelligent selection. So this works really good for flat two-dimensional objects, not so good in images that have gradation. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect, and that is the magic wand. We have a couple more selection tools that are available. They are under the Lasso tool, and that is the Polygonal Lasso. And the Polygonal Lasso lets you draw straight lines. So if you remember before, when we made the Lasso tool, we can just anywhere we drew. But if we go to the Polygonal Lasso tool, and I'm going to hold Shift just to add, now I can draw straight lines. So if you have an object like this rectangle up here, this would be very beneficial. I could come up here to this point. I can left click, right? It's going to set a point. Click another point. Click. Click. And if you notice, when you get to the end, it gets that little circle. That means you've finished off the selection. If you don't do that, it won't close your selection out. I've made that selection, and the Polygonal Lasso tool works really well. But guess what? There's a better way to do this. So we're going to go to the Lasso tool, okay? And so I'm going to select the bird, right? And then right here, I'm going to switch to the Polygonal Lasso tool. So I have sort of round organic shapes. But if I hold Option key now and I let go of the left click with my mouse, it turns in to the Polygonal Lasso. And I can click to set a point, 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 click to set a point. And now I can let go of that Alt or Option key. That is Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and then I can continue using sort of that organic form of the normal lasso tool. So the lasso tool is free form and I had a feather on it, and that's why it's not giving an exact selection. So we would need to lower that if we need it to be more exact. And a trick is, how in the world do you know what to set the feather to? Well, it depends on the resolution of your image. So how big is your photo? In the size of your object. So if your object is large, you can have a larger feather because it's going to make a better selection. If you have a smaller area and you need to be more exact, then you want to lower that feather. And I'm just going to do this really quickly, just so you can see how much more accurate it is than the way before. So you can see that one's much more accurate than we did when we had that higher feather. So that is the polygonal lasso tool and the normal lasso tool working together. And that's it for selection tools inside of Adobe Photoshop. Now, we do have some other options, and we're going to take a look at those in another video. And if you go to select, we can also select by color range, by focus area, by subject, and sky. And we're going to take a look at those when we do select and mask. So what I would suggest to everyone out there is you practice. Practice making selections with all the tools. You don't need to use them all, though some work better in certain situations. I wouldn't have the tools over here if I didn't use them. One of the tools that I don't use is the magnetic lasso, because I hate the magnetic lasso. But basically you draw and it sets points of where they think they should be. You close it off and boom, it makes a selection. So I absolutely hate the magnetic lasso. It's been around forever. It's never worked really good for me, so I do not use it. So that is the magnetic lasso, and the reason it's down here is because I've hidden it from my normal toolbar, but I can still access it if I need it. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did and could give us a thumbs up, share this with your friends. Let them know about Shutterbug Academy and the videos that we're putting out. That would be absolutely wonderful. Any comments, you can put those below. If you have comments that are more complicated, you can head on over to our Facebook group. That information is available in the description, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a wonderful day and see you in the next video.